Hey everybody, and welcome back to our series on Spanish translation. In today's video lesson, we're going to talk about the analysis step in the translation process, just sort of give you an overview as an introduction to a couple more specific topics related to the analysis step. So you'll recall in the five-part or five-step model of translation that we've been discussing that analysis is the second step. And I mentioned in the previous video that really we can think of steps 1 and 2 as almost an interrelated single step, because as we as the translator are reading the source text carefully, trying to interpret it or determine what it means, our brains are performing an analysis. That is, they're assessing the contributions of several contextual and textual factors, so those extralinguistic and linguistic factors of meaning, to that source text meaning. So we're trying to answer the question, not only what does the source text mean, but how does it create and convey that meaning? So that's the analysis part. Again, going back to Mildred's meaning-centered model of translation, I've sort of highlighted the area where our interpretation and analysis would be happening, right? We have our source text. As we're interpreting and performing that analysis, we're trying to discover not only what the text means, but what factors are responsible for the creation and the communication of that meaning. And then I almost have that shading covering the re-expression or the reformulation phase, because in theory, that analysis that we do is going to help us to better reformulate the meaning into the target language. Okay, moving on then. Something that relates to analysis and translation is the idea central to translation studies that translation is an activity that involves continuous decision making. Okay, it's a process of constant decision making. So I believe that asking the right questions before you start translating, before you start typing, right, creating the target text, can help you to make better translations as you translate. So I make a distinction between orienting questions and problem-specific decisions. Orienting questions are those questions you ask before you translate. They, in theory, guide the interpretation, analysis, and strategizing steps in the model. And ideally, they inform how you as translator handle these problem-specific decisions. So they're sort of the 30,000-foot decisions. You're mapping out your translation. You're trying to figure out what makes the source text tick so that you can account for that as you create the target text in the reformulation stage. On the other hand, problem-specific decisions are those decisions about how to resolve specific problems that arise as you translate. So you don't know the equivalent for a term, or you're not sure how to handle this particular grammatical structure. Now you're looking at a problem-specific decision. And those should be the answers to those problem-specific decisions, in theory, would be informed by how you answer the orienting questions. All right, so this distinction between orienting questions, right, big picture, 30,000-foot view, and problem-specific decisions, how you're fixing things on the ground as you encounter them. It's part of analysis. So to focus a little bit more closely on those orienting questions, here are some examples. So I've got the source text in front of me. I'm performing this sort of simultaneous interpretation of the source text and analysis of the source text. I should be asking myself questions like these. What specific genre or text type does this text belong to? What's it about, right? To what real-world domain does it pertain? Education, science, art, literature, business, technology, healthcare. What's the text's purpose and dominant language function? We'll talk about more of the language functions in a minute. Is the author of the text, is his or her identity important? Is it a famous author, or is it more of a generic corporate author, right? What's the author's intention, if that's important? How would you characterize the intended readership, the audience of the text? Are they educated? Are they consumers? Are they very specialized? Is the text's overall linguistic register more formal or informal? The language used in the text, its register, is it formal or informal? Somewhere in between. What's the tone conveyed by the text's language? What's the attitude that it projects about its content, right? Is it serious? Is it hopeful? Is it playful? Think of words to describe attitude or tone. Is it style? What's the style of the text like? Is it fairly generic? Is it straightforward? Or is it more dense and complex, or unique, peculiar in some way? Style is nothing more than how a particular author or text uses or combines the elements of language. Does the text have many specialized or technical terms, or does it rely on more common everyday types of words? When thinking about grammar, what kinds of grammar forms, structures, and functions stand out in the text? Do you notice a lot of past tense? Do you notice a lot of gerund forms? Do you notice a lot of, or anticipate using the subjunctive, for example, if you're translating into a Romance language? And is the text meaning supposed to be clear and easy to determine? Usually the answer to that is yes. Or is it supposed to be vague and open to various interpretations? Think of a literary text or a poem or something like that. So these are examples of orienting questions, part of the analysis phase when we're trying to determine what are the factors that contribute to the meaning of a text and how do they do so. All right, we're going to stop this lesson right here, but the next two lessons deal with these related topics. We'll take a closer look at the basic language functions developed by Karl Brunner, that German language theorist, and then I'll also walk you through in the next video, I guess the third video in the series, the translation log, which is a log that I have a tool that I have my students work on, which focuses, a good portion of it has to do with this analysis step in the model. So stay tuned for the next couple of short, promise they'll be short, video lessons. Thanks for your attention.